by our colleagues. This is going to come into effect January 1st, 2024. So we want to make sure that everybody is on board on the same page, that we are discussing any issues or any hurdles beforehand, and that we can smooth things out so that we all understand our role to play in this SEZ work from home framework. And I'm just going to take you through specifically the legal background behind it, the main principles that are guiding the framework, and then Ainsley is going to take us through the monitoring aspects of it and the compliance aspects of it, specifically with the SRMI tool, which we should be familiar with now. If at any time you have any questions, pardon me, if at any time you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we will deal with them either at the end of each segment or at the end of the entire presentation. So as mentioned before, we want persons to be able to understand the work from home framework, to be able to use the SRMI tool for compliance, and to understand generally the compliance requirements required of the framework.
You remember the...
Pardon me? I think that was an open mic. Okay, so for the overview of the framework, persons approached the authority because of what came out of the COVID pandemic. Work culture has changed, and persons, thanks to the provision of internet and Wi-Fi and equipment, work from home is now a possibility. Now, as we all know, a special economic zone is a physical, geographical area for which certain rules apply and certain rules do not apply. And the reason for an SEZ is to ensure that persons within the zone can access certain benefits, and in turn, that the government and the country can reap certain benefits. So work from home is a little bit outside of what was originally contemplated for a special economic zone. That said, we have done some of the research required to see how it can be implemented and integrated. And we've spoken to both our local and international partners. And while they have raised some issues and some hurdles, we have managed to come up with what we believe can be a good workaround and integration of work from home. That said, I am sure that things will arise when we are in the midst of work from home that we would not have thought of at the time of the concept. So I want to say from the get-go that we need your feedback in order to make this work for all of us. One of the things that we've done ahead of time is we have shared an email and some letters with our stakeholders to indicate what the framework is and how it will work. However, if you have not received that email or if you have not received that letter, please let us know and we will send it to you. One of the things that we've done in that is we've indicated that for your purposes, we will be issuing a work from home certificate. Now I put certificate in because it may not be a separate certificate from your operating certificate. It may just be a note on your operating certificate, but it will still count and be referred to as work from home certification. And this is just an acknowledgement in writing that the SEZ stakeholder has received its necessary clearance from the authority and its compliance partners to engage an employee or several employees to work from their home outside of the gazetted special economic zone, and they are allowed to do so without breaching the SEZ license, right? So who qualifies for work from home? Stakeholders of the SEZ that are in good standing, who are not beyond the 70-30 ratio, may submit a notification in a standard form, and we will provide you with that form, that they have engaged work from home employees for a given quarter or in a given quarter, right? So the easiest way to check to see if you're in good standing with the SEZ is to send an email either to your business development manager or to RPME by way of Mr. Ainsley Brown, and you can ask the question, are we in good standing? A good way to monitor for yourselves is whether or not you're in good standing is to check the SRMI tool and to check to see that your reports have been submitted and there's an acknowledgement of your report. Now, if you look back at your license agreements, you will also see that compliance and good standing has to do with your good standing with our partner agencies. So that includes the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the TAJ, and the JCA, right? So all of that needs to be in good standing in order for you to qualify for work from home. There are 3 parameters that are going to be very important. The first one that we should and must take knowledge of is income generating activity. Your income generating activity must take place within the zone. If you are carrying out activities within the zone that do not generate income, and it can be found that your income generation actually happens outside of the zone, then you are in breach of your license agreement, and we will have to withdraw and revoke your operating certificate. An easy way to find out whether or not your income generating activity is happening within the zone is by looking at what operations are happening in the zone and how much of your income is coming from that operation, right? If it turns out that the majority, for example, if you are a service provider and the services that are happening in the zone are administrative or back office services like HR or accounts, and the servicing of your clients are happening by way of work from home, so it's taking place outside of the zone, and they are the ones that are carrying out your obligations under your contracts with your clients for that service, then that is not what we need for that to happen by way of making sure your income generation happens within the zone. If 70% of your income generating activity happens within the zone and 30% happens outside, then it is not a clear breach. Number 2, outsourcing of supplemental activity is permissible outside the zone. So if you do outsourcing of particular activity that forms part of your approved activities on your schedule of activities, then this is also permissible. So it doesn't have to be, for example, a service provider. If you are a manufacturer and you outsource your HR or your salary payments to somebody else outside of the zone, that is considered to be permissible. The entity receiving the benefit should be able to clearly demonstrate this distinction for the purposes of an audit. And we will speak more about monitoring later, but that distinction isn't for us to prove as the regulators, it is for you guys to prove as the persons who are the developers or the occupants. That burden is on you. And if you are unable to prove that, then you may be found to be in breach. Number 3, developers and occupants are responsible for record keeping and must present records of their operations and activities within and outside of the zone as requested. This includes all movement of assets. So, for example, if you are providing services and this requires equipment to be moved between your offices and your work from home employees, that record of information is something that you are required to produce at any time for any of the regulating agencies. That could be customs, that could be TAJ, that could be the Ministry of Finance, that could be the SEZ authority. So that responsibility lies with the developers and the occupants. Where an occupant is unable to produce that record, we do have the ability through the Act and through the license agreements to require that information from the developer. It's going to be hard for the developer to access that information, so we would ask that developers encourage strongly their occupants to keep track of that information so that it is readily available. Where there is a challenge in providing that information, the JCA or the TAG do have the power to indicate that there is a breach or that they're conducting an investigation. And then we will issue to you, once we have that information, a particular warning letter, which will let you know that your operating certificate, unfortunately, may be withdrawn or revoked. We don't want persons to be in that situation. So we have a fair amount of time to work together with you to ensure that something can be arranged in terms of how you keep your records, in terms of how you use the SRMI tool, in terms of how you notify us to ensure that that record keeping is ideal. Other obligations to note: the health and safety requirements that currently exist in your license agreements and your subconcession agreements continue and are extended outside of the zone to the home of the employee. So those OSHA guidelines, and they're still guidelines at this time, but nevertheless, they are part of what forms your license agreement, are still required to be upheld within the home of the employee. Equipment insurance will be the responsibility of the employer and not the employee. So when you're looking at depreciating your assets, you're going to have to bear that in mind. Loss prevention must be outlined in the agreement between the employer and the employee. If there's a pattern of equipment going missing to the home of the employee, that is going to raise a red flag, and an investigation will be launched as to whether or not this is an issue for revenue loss or leakage. Compensation or benefits will be determined by the respective parties in keeping with the law of Jamaica and ILO best practice. Cybersecurity and data protection and all appropriate protocols and security measures must be installed and maintained by the employer, and they must meet the standards of the Data Protection Act. No work from home arrangements between employer and employee should result in a breach of any law, regulation, or policy. So despite the fact that they're working outside the zone, and despite the fact that it is their home, you need to make sure that any arrangements, any agreements between yourself and the employees must follow all laws. Okay, so we're going into the monitoring aspect of things now. So I am going to switch over to Mr. Brown, and I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, thanks, Janice. Let me just bring up presentation. One second, folks. Let me just switch over. Right. Just double checking everyone's hearing me and seeing the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Morning again, everyone. For those of you that are our clients, or maybe you work on behalf of the client, you would be very familiar with this portal that you see here. And Janice referenced it, the SRMI, the Self-Reporting Monitoring Instrument. This is the portal where you report to us periodically, depending on who you are. If you're a developer, it's twice yearly. Single entity and occupants, it is quarterly, calendar quarter, that is. So you'll be very familiar with this. So what we're going to be doing is using this portal as your main area for a variety of things. And we're moving beyond just it being information that we gather on you in relation. As you can see here, this is from the 2021 report, which you can find it on our website. We're expanding the functionality. So basically, it will be 4 portals in one. So it's one portal, but 4 different applications. So, and technically 5, because the original function still remains there in terms of the quarterly and twice yearly reporting. So it will be an application portal for you to apply for the work from home certificate. We'll use it as monitoring, renewal portal in terms of you renewing your, not just your work from home, but also your operating certificates. And then also it's a compliance portal. So basics of the application process. There will be an application process naturally that will facilitate this. It's not an automatic right. So you have to have an application process to indicate this is what you want. If you are just coming into the zone or you're applying for a new location, basically it will be just a check of a box that says, yes, I want this to apply to my facility, because we cannot assume that you actually do want it to apply to your facility or your entity or company. And it will be done in the initial application, as I said, check of a box. For those that are already in the system and using the existing work from home facility, there will be a transition process to bring you over into the new dispensation. In terms of the monitoring portal, it's very, very important, as Janice emphasized, that there be up-to-date records kept, and the up-to-date records particularly pertaining to your equipment and the movement of your equipment in and out of the zone. This is crucial. This is one of those things that it's helping us and helping you in terms of ensuring that you remain on the right side of the law in relation to potential for revenue loss or revenue leakage in terms of equipment not being accounted for or stolen or lost, right? You also must, as with anything, just like when you submit your annual filings for TAJ, you must submit your reports on time. And that includes, as we have now, the SRMI reports, along with the update in your movement of your equipment. Interesting to note that, and there's a little list there, but it's not an exhaustive list. It can be other government bodies may conduct from time to time audits and investigations of your physical location, or to come in and inspect your books or your actual physical location to see if you are in compliance. Further with the monitoring, you will be required to file, which is very similar to what existed with when the COVID protocols were brought out. You have to file account for your employees, the 70-30, the 30 that you're having work from home, and of course the equipment that they have has to be tagged to them. So we know that this computer, this laptop, this headset, this belongs to this person and it's going to this location, right? And of course, we're going to ensure that this is done electronically on the SRMI and not be paper-based. The SEZ entities, you are valued clients, must keep staff attendance records. Again, this is to balance the 70-30 to ensure that you remain on the right side of that. And whenever there are changes, we know that you work in or operate in a very dynamic space. So whenever there are changes, you promptly update your records. There will be a prescribed period in which you must do so. And the prescribed period will be fair and balanced in terms of the length of time given to you. Renewal. The work from home permits shall be automatically be renewed, right? However, this renewal is based upon your compliance. You remain eligible, and that is to say remain in good standing, as Janice emphasize payment of requisite fees, and also unless you indicate otherwise, you may choose not to have it renewed, so then it wouldn't be renewed. But if you say nothing, it will be automatically renewed, and provided that you're in good standing and have paid your fees. Compliance, the compliance portal. This plays a critical role in, well, granting the certificate in the first instance, particularly for those that are in the system already, and for those that are going to renew. It's important that you remain in good standing. We are working out for want of a better word, a stoplight system, almost a heat map, where if you're in the green, and there will be different shades of green, you're good to go. If you are amber, there may be some matters that you need to work on, and we will work with you to get that done, because the entire monitoring, compliance, and enforcement framework is not about policing, and it's not about heavy-handed tactics. It's all about bringing you, our clients, to be self-compliant and walking you through that, right? So we've said this already, adherence to the compliance framework, compliance results in automatic renewal. The overall objective, as I said before, is self-compliance, and any unresolved breaches of the SEZ compliance may result in delays or lack of renewals, as Janice emphasized as well. However, our objective at all times is to work with the client and other regulatory partners to achieve compliance. In terms of the compliance criteria, we just want to see overall compliance, adherence to the Act, the regulations, the terms of your license or your authorization if you're an occupant, be tax compliant. The SEZ regime is a fiscal regime, so it is very important, vitally important, that you remain tax compliant. And that is to say that if you are eligible to pay taxes, that you do so. And all SEZ entities, even the developers who have zero corporate income tax, are required still to file their returns annually. You must adhere to the 70-30 ratio and promptly report to the requisite authorities as required, or as may be required. There may be, for example, if there's theft, you must report it to the JCF promptly, and of course report to us and JCA to say this was stolen. Unfortunately, when something like that happens, while we would not deduct it or count it against you in terms of compliance, you would potentially have duties be payable upon that occurring. But your prompt action to report the theft will count towards actually you abiding by the compliance framework.